Thank you for coming. We're standing in front of 290 Broadway, which is a federal building where my district office is and where immigration court is. Today, I had the opportunity to both observe immigration court and observe observe plainclothes officers wearing masks, arresting and detaining immigrants who were here to appear in front of a judge as part of their court case. The Department of Homeland Security has implemented over the last week a coordinated effort to do an end run around our legal system in order to remove nonviolent, non-criminal immigrants trying to come into this country through a lawful pathway of immigration proceedings, in many cases asylum proceedings. And by recommending dismissal of their cases, the Department of Homeland Security is essentially taking jurisdiction away from the court, removing the asylum application from the going forward, and then allowing the immigration agents to arrest these people and put them in a deportation proceeding under a different authority than the one that they just dismissed, which has fewer rights and applies in very few circumstances, almost never internally in the country, almost always at the border. This is Gestapo-like behavior, where plainclothes officers wearing masks are terrorizing immigrants who are doing the right thing by going to court, following up on their immigration proceedings, and trying to come into this country lawfully, which is through asylum. I observed the courtroom today where there was one proceeding where the Department of Homeland Security moved to dismiss the case. The judge granted the dismissal. The gentleman left the courtroom and then was arrested. As I was leaving the courtroom, there were about 15 other people there, and I asked if anyone spoke English. There wasn't a single person who spoke English. There did not appear to be a single lawyer there representing them. These are routine appearances. They're updates. They're administrative. There is no reason for anyone to have expected anything unusual to happen today, and yet they're ripped away from their families, from their communities, even though they're trying to do the right thing, pursue the American dream, come to this country, as so many of us and our ancestors have, for the promise of the American dream. Finally, let me focus on some of the interactions I had with the ICE agents. I was a federal prosecutor for 10 years right there. I worked with the Department of Homeland Security. I worked with ICE agents. I worked with Homeland Security's investigations. I have never seen any plainclothes officer wearing a mask. And I asked them, why are you wearing a mask? One person told me, because it's cold. I asked him if he would testify to that under oath, and he walked away and wouldn't respond to me. Another person admitted that they're wearing masks so that they are not caught on video. And my question to them is, if what you are doing is legitimate, is lawful, is totally above board, why do you need to cover your face? Law enforcement officers do not cover their face. And in fact, the Trump administration is cracking down on universities for allowing protesters to wear masks. So apparently it is not okay to wear a mask if you're protesting the government, but it is okay if you are the government to wear masks and in order to shield your face from the public. This is not America. This is not who we are. And if you are a violent criminal, if you're a convicted criminal, then you should be deported. I 100% agree with that. But these people are doing it the right way. They're not criminals. They're not, quote, murderers. They're not, quote, rapists that Stephen Miller talks about all the time. They're trying to seek a better life. They're trying to escape horrific conditions at home in order to come to this great democracy and pursue the American dream. This is not who we are. This is not how our government should behave. And we will continue to demand answers from the Department of Homeland Security about what they are doing, why they are doing it, and why they are doing this end run around the legal process. Happy to take some questions.
As an American, what was your own personal, visceral reaction to seeing what you saw?
Well, it hits especially home for me. My grandmother escaped anti-Semitism in Ukraine, came here through Ellis Island, was welcomed into this country. Her family resettled down in Baltimore, Washington, D.C. Her brother worked and sent my grandmother through college. That's the American dream. I'm also, as a Jew, very familiar with the Gestapo in Nazi Germany, and other forms of secret law enforcement in Russia and elsewhere that used fear and intimidation and under the cover of night, under the cover of masks, in order to terrorize people that they did not like. And ultimately, what this comes down to is not anything having to do with the border. It is not anything having to do with our immigration system. It is simply an effort by the Trump administration to remove as many foreigners as possible from this country so that they can return to the 1950s under this great replacement theory and go back to a world of white supremacism that does not include immigrants trying to come to this country to seek a better life.
Can you give us a sense of from when these hearings begin to when the case is dismissed to them being in ICE custody? How long a period of time is that?
You mean after the dismissal?
From the start of their hearing to when they're being deported in ICE custody, how long a time period are we talking?
10 minutes, 15 minutes. They go up to the court. The government lawyer moves to dismiss the case. In many cases, the judge agrees to dismiss the case because the judge doesn't have that much discretion. I think, I don't know, because I don't speak Wolof or Spanish, which is what everybody was speaking up there. But my guess is that they just think that their removal proceedings are being dismissed. They leave. There were several ICE agents right outside the courtroom, which is on a higher floor, and then they notify a dozen or so agents who were in the lobby here that a particular person is coming downstairs, and they are waiting for them to come out of the elevator when they arrest them. So, 10 minutes is my best estimate.
There's a law in New York State that says ICE agents cannot arrest. They can't even come into state courthouses and attempt to arrest immigrants in state courts. Is that something that you think can or should be extended to federal courts within New York State's boundaries? Is legally could that happen? No.
Whatever the state law is does not apply to a federal building. But what I will say, actually, is that there were a couple of reporters who were here witnessing it, videotaping it. One of the ICE agents started yelling at the reporter to put the phone away, to stop videotaping it, making the argument that it's a federal building and you're not allowed to videotape, which is flatly not the case. Simply not true, not accurate. You're allowed to videotape in a public space in a federal building. You can't videotape in a courtroom, but in the lobby you are allowed to videotape. But again, they're trying to do this under the cover of darkness, in secret as much as possible. And the question for every American to ask is why? Why are they covering their faces? Why are they trying to avoid being videotaped?
Can you tell us how many immigrants you actually saw maybe get detained or arrested in the amount of time that you were actually observing for?
I was in between meetings, and I was here for about 15, 20 minutes, and I saw 2 arrests. My staff has been monitoring this all week, and they've seen many more than that, including one person who was arrested even though his case was not dismissed. And so there was no grounds for him to be arrested, but they're just arresting everybody who comes out of the courtroom. In that particular case, the individual had an advisor with him who told him that he should object to the dismissal of the case, which he did, and the judge therefore did not grant the dismissal. So his status was the same going into the courtroom as coming out of the courtroom as it was going in, and he was still arrested. They are just arresting everybody, and they'll figure it out later.
And I wanted to follow up. You know, the question now is, if the immigrants that are doing the right thing, coming to court so they can get permanent legal status here, are getting arrested just as if somebody doesn't come to court, you know, what's your message? Should they be coming? Are you putting money towards legal services? Some advocates say that's the problem because so many of them come here and don't have any representation, so they don't understand. You know, what would you say to somebody? Should they come to the court hearing, and are you planning to put any federal funds into legal services for them?
Well, I've sponsored legislation that would increase federal funding for immigration attorneys, especially for children. And we're seeing children around the country who are very ill and who were legally let into the country for humanitarian relief are being deported and face imminent death upon deportation when they're 4 years old. So I've been long a supporter of increasing funding so that children and other immigrants who are going through our immigration system can get advice. It's in a foreign language, and it's a complicated law that I have spent a lot of time myself as a lawyer trying to learn, and we're seeing why legal representation matters is because they are effectively enduring a sneak attack against them because they're doing the right thing. And you hear about catch and release and how terrible it is. Well, these are people who were released and they're appearing in court. And because they're appearing in court, they're getting arrested. And so the incentive is absurd because it's just going to push people underground more. It's going to encourage people to avoid the legal system, to avoid following proper procedures. And by doing that, you are creating more danger, more public safety issues, because there's less accountability and there's less legitimacy to the proceedings. So the net effect may be that Donald Trump gets to broadcast that he has deported more people according to his campaign promises, none of whom, by the way, are convicted criminals, which he said he was going to focus on. But you're making the problem much, much worse.
Congressman, the way you describe this, some people would hear this and it sounds like these are federal agencies, different federal agencies. They might use the word conspiring to create this as a policy, as a tactic for dealing with undocumented immigrants. How would you describe that?
It is clearly a coordinated effort between the Homeland Security lawyers and ICE, which is a separate division of the Department of Homeland Security. One other note, one of the agents that I approached and spoke to today is an FBI agent. Apparently, headquarters of the FBI has directed agents, a part of the FBI, to join these operations to support ICE officials. So when you talk about a coordinated effort, it's bigger than just the Department of Homeland Security. It is also the FBI. They're, of course, being taken away from investigating serious crimes so they can stand by while plainclothes officers arrest non-violent, non-criminal immigrants going through the proper procedures, yet again making our communities less safe.
Can you just sort of clarify for us, what are you going to do about it? What can you do about it?
Well, I think first what today's purpose was to understand exactly what was going on. We have seen this over the course of the last week or so, not just here in Manhattan, but around the country. And so I wanted to see it firsthand to understand exactly how this was working and what was going on. I think it's really important, first and foremost, for the American people to understand that they have been sold a bill of goods by Donald Trump. He is not removing bad people, criminals, so-called murderers, so-called child rapists that he seems to describe every immigrant as being. He is actually using our legal system to remove the people who are doing things the right way. The next step that we're going to take is, as a member of the Homeland Security Committee, I'm going to go back to Washington next week, and we are going to aggressively demand answers from the Department of Homeland Security about what this policy is, why they implemented it, and get a lot more details from the administration. The Trump administration has been effectively non-responsive to Democrats' requests, but we're going to keep making them because we represent the American people, and I am certain the American people want answers to those questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you.